Hello and welcome to Tech Deal's how-to guide, how to install system RAM, a solid state drive, a graphics card, and a case fan into this $450 Acer Aspire T desktop computer. Now, I've previously done reviews of these computers in the past, and there will be more upcoming performance videos. However, for now, we are simply doing a how-to video to physically install these four components. And here we are looking at the top-down view. You can see our Acer Aspire T computer here. You can see we have two memory sticks. I'm actually going to replace the included memory stick for a matched set. You don't have to do that. I'm just doing it because I can. We have our 256 gigabyte solid state drive. We have our NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 graphics card. And then finally, we have our case fan that we'll be installing in the back. The first step is to take a screwdriver and to take off the two screws on the back of the case here. You want the side of the case with the vent holes facing upward, laying on its side on a flat surface. And then we simply take the handle here and we slide it back. You will see the metal strip right here. Once it's back this far, it simply lifts straight off, and we'll set that aside. Here you can see the inside of the computer case. Briefly, this is our main power supply. This is what takes the AC power from the wall and turns it into the various power sources that our computer requires. This is the cooling fan on top of our processor. Underneath that is actually the processor itself. Here you can see one 8 gig memory stick. There is a free slot here for a second 8 gig stick. Now I'm going to be replacing both of them with my match set. However, if you use the links in the video description below to order your memory stick, you can just buy one 8 gig stick and install it here, leaving the existing memory stick in place. This here is the back end of the hard drive sticking out. It's attached to the side of the case right here with these screws. We're not going to be messing with that at all. We'll leave that right there. This is going to be the mounting point for our solid state drive. These four holes, it's going to mount here, sticking out to the back. Now, it is worth noting that this computer case only comes with two serial ATA ports on the motherboard. In order to make use of our solid state drive, we are going to have to lose the DVD burner, the DVD reader and writer, which is up here. You can't see it, it's behind there. Now, I don't care because I don't use these. If you do care, you have two choices. Briefly, you can install in this small slot right here a serial ATA access card that will give you two additional serial ATA ports. But if you do so, then you won't be able to install a graphics card here because it would block it because it uses both slots. Another option is to install an M.2 SSD. You can't see it from here, but it's actually right underneath the hard drive on the motherboard. I actually did that on the previous Acer Aspire T. The problem with doing that is then you can't clone Windows. You have to do a clean install. I have tried endlessly to get it to clone from a serial ATA drive. It doesn't want to do that. So we are installing a 2.5-inch SSD in order to allow us to use the cloning software, and we're just ditching the DVD burner. And here you can see the inside of the computer case. Really briefly, this is our main power supply. This draws power from the wall and converts it to the 12 volt, 5 volt, and 3.3 volt power that all of our components need. Now, this does not need to be replaced in order to install our GTX 1060 graphics card because we'll be using this included power adapter which came with the graphics card. It'll work just fine. If you want to put something more powerful in, yes, you'd need to replace it, but this is the wrong computer if you want something faster than that card. This right here is the cooling fan for our processor. Underneath this is actually the processor. Don't mess with it, it's fine, but that's what that is. We have our single 8 gigabyte memory stick here. Now, I'm going to be replacing this with my matched set of memory just because I can. However, if you order an 8 gigabyte DDR4 memory stick using my link in the video description, you don't have to do that. Buy one 8 gig stick, it'll work. Just stick it in and put them together. Now, this is the hard drive that's actually sticking out. It's mounted here on these 4 points. The hard drive, power, and data we're not going to be messing with. We will, however, be copying Windows from the hard drive to the SSD, retaining our data and programs. Up here, you can't see it, but it's screwed in right here, is our DVD drive sticking out the front. This is our PCI Express graphics card slot. This right here is where our GTX 1060 is going to install. This pops up here. I'll show you that when we get to that part. And then finally, right here, even though you can't see it very well at the moment, is where we're going to be installing our fan. Now, the solid state drive is going to go into these 4 holes right here and mount next to the hard drive. They provide us with a place to put it, so it'll mount here, and we'll connect the cables when we get there. At the bottom of the system, this right here is the Wi-Fi adapter. If you're curious, it actually is replaceable. It is a module in a slot on the motherboard. The two wires connecting to it run up to the top of the case, providing you an internal antenna, and you can actually see one of them run back here, connected to this box on the back. So one runs to the front, one runs to the back. That is your Wi-Fi adapter, if you are curious. First things first, let's do the easy installation, our main system RAM. Now, system RAM is very straightforward because there's no configuration, and there are these two release tabs that you push out on both sides. I just pushed out the white tabs for the open memory slot. But to demonstrate how to remove memory, I'm going to remove this module by pushing down on this tab, and it pops it up, and I'll push down on this tab and pop it up. No real force is required. Those are very easy to open. Once they're down, you'll actually physically see the memory come up. You just slide it out gently. That takes finger pressure. And there is our 8 GB DDR4 memory stick. You can identify DDR4 because it is taller in the middle than it is on the sides. This notch is not in the middle. This notch is also in a different spot for DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. You cannot switch between the types. If your memory slots are DDR3, you have to use 3. If they're 4, you have to use 4. So we have DDR4, so I'm going to be installing two 8 GB memory sticks DDR4 into this machine. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. I'll save it for something else. You do not have to use matched memory, but I'm going to simply because, well, I had this kit sitting on the shelf and I don't have a spare single stick of 8. So when you take the memory, you want to look at the notch and you want to look at the notch on the motherboard. You want to make sure that the shorter end lines up with the shorter end. Memory goes straight down and straight up. It does not tilt like this. It does not tilt at an angle. And these edges of the circuit board of the memory slide into these groove slots right here. All you have to do is line it up vertically and insert it gently into those slots, and it will rest like so. There's a little bit of wiggle because I haven't pushed down on it. I'm not moving it, I'm just touching it barely. So you want to put your fingers on either end of it and push down at the same time, and you'll hear 2 clicks. 1, 2. There we go. So that memory module is now installed. We'll take our next memory module, and I'll line it up, and I'll insert the notches on either end. And it goes in just like that. And 1, 2. The memory's installed. Now, if all you're interested in doing is upgrading your RAM, you would just install your second stick of memory into this one, leaving the first. I just did this because, like I said, I had the kit on the shelf. And then put the cover back on, turn the machine on. It will automatically detect that you now have 16 gigs of RAM. Windows will automatically use it. There is nothing left to do. You are done at this point. Easiest upgrade ever. However, if you are still interested in doing any of the other upgrades, then stick around. We're going to keep doing that. The next upgrade is going to be our graphics card. Now, there's our graphics card slot, and one of the most common questions I get on my channel is, which should I buy, a GeForce GTX 1060 or an AMD RX 470 or 480? Now, in terms of performance per dollar, the RX 470 and 480 are actually a better deal at the moment than the GTX 1060. However, this is an EVGA GTX 1060 superclocked graphics card. It's going to install right there. Take a look at the clearance. It fits just fine. There's our 6-pin power connector. It is a moderately sized unit that fits perfectly in pre-built machines, and I highly, highly recommend that card. Now, another card that I have reviewed in the past are cards such as this. This is an Asus Republic of Gamers Strix RX 470. You can buy these for $50 or less below the cost of the GTX 1060. However, take a look at the length. That's how it would sit in the slot. This drive cage is in the way. Same thing, I will take an MSI. Here is an MSI Armor OC RX 470. These also are in the $130 to $150 range, and that's where it would install. Again, they're too large. And finally, we have an XFX RX 470. Very nice card, very good deal. Take a look at the size. It does not fit. I have a number of RX 470 and RX 480 cards. None of them fit into these pre-built machines. The drive cages are in the way, cables are in the way. It is nothing but trouble. Furthermore, many of these, now this one has a 6-pin, the MSI has an 8-pin, would require replacing the power supply. The GTX 1060 does not, and this is an important point because most of these are 150 plus watt cards. That is a 120 watt card, so it's much more compatible with lower wattage power supplies. My advice, if you are custom building your own machine in a larger case than this, the RX 470 and 480 are the deal. But if you buy a pre-built such as this in a smaller mini tower case, the GTX 1060 is what you want to buy. So with that out of the way, we have two adapter options. This is two Molex adapters to one 6-pin PCI Express. This comes with the EVGA superclocked card. Not all 1060s will come with a free adapter. Great card, great price. Now, this computer does have the two Molex connectors. Here's one's down there that you will need, but they're covered by twist ties. And so you will need to take clippers and you will need to cut these. With that out of the way, and of course make sure you cut the plastic tie and not the power cables. With that out of the way, we now have two Molex power connectors we can connect to this. Now I've done this before in other rebuilds. This is a 300 watt power supply. This will work just fine. You do not have to replace this to install that graphics card. Another option, if you don't want to use these, is you can use the serial ATA power connector using an adapter such as this. Now this did not come with that. I have these from other situations. This takes a serial ATA power connector and converts it to a 6-pin connector. So it is an alternative option. If you have a different pre-built machine or yours, whatever reason, doesn't have two Molex connectors, that's the other way you can get to a 6-pin PCI Express power cable. But since I have these, I'm going to use them. And the trick is these kind of move around a bit, so you just cut there we go. That one been pretty easily actually. And there we go. And now you'll notice we have a mess of cables. This is why I use these cable ties. These are about $5 for 200 cable ties. I'll put a link in the video description below to Amazon. If you are doing upgrades, spend $5 and get these. Now, if you already have some, by all means, use them. But these are much better than twist ties because these are flat and thus don't bite into the cables over time. Furthermore, they can be adjusted, tightened, or loosened, and they're going to stay. Once you pull them tight, they're never ever going to come loose again. 200 of them for $5. I use them on all my builds. This has lasted me for a year and a half. These will last you a long, long time. So for now, I'm just putting that aside to get it out of the way. We have to prepare the back of the case in order to handle our graphics card. Now this tab here is toolless and it's very nice. Take a look at that. That just pops open just like so. No screws or anything, very easy. However, the back plates are covered. You have to remove them in order to install the graphics card. What does it look like? I have now turned the computer on the front. This is the back. You can see the power supply is way up here at the top. This is where our additional fan for cooling is going to go to make sure that our nice graphics card doesn't get too hot. And then here are the slots coming out the back. Now you can see this blocks the way. I just wanted to show you how it opened. I'm actually going to go ahead and close it now and you'll see how it covers it up. Just like so. While we're back here, this is a convenient time to point out that if you are not adding a graphics card, we have an HDMI out and a VGA out port if you want to use those. This supports 1080p at 60 Hertz, no problem. You can plug in a computer monitor there and you'll be rocking and rolling. However, we are not going to use it, so make sure that if you had previously plugged in a monitor to this port, you switch it to your graphics card. Now to do this properly, you need a standard Phillips screwdriver. We need to remove these top two plates. They don't screw off, they break off. They're actually only attached by two notches here and one in the middle. Do you see these two crosses? We take this, we stick it in here, and we push and then bend. And you're gonna have to bend it back and forth. There we go. We pop it out and we pop it down. And all you're trying to do here is break the metal very carefully. Back and forth. Back and forth. Now, normally you wouldn't do it with it sitting up because when it breaks, it's going to fall into the machine. But I want to show it to you so that you can see what it looks like. Do it when it's on its side so that you can catch it when it falls off. One of those do as I say, not as I do things because I'm trying to do it for the camera. And there we go. Part of it's broken off and now we can just wiggle it back and forth. Now, if you don't have a well, first of all, you need the screwdriver to take this out of the case off and put everything else in, but This is how I remove them anyway. I'm sure somebody in the comments will say, hey, there's an easier way to do it. Actually, there probably is. You could take a pair of pliers and push them back and forth, but hey, they provide the crosses for you, and if you only have a screwdriver, there you go. Do make an effort when you're doing this not to bend the case. This metal on the case here is very thin. There we go. I just spent about 20 or 30 seconds working it back and forth. You're just weakening these metal notches. These, just put in recycle. They're done. You'll never use them again. We now have the opening for the graphics card, and in a minute, you're going to see the ports through those spaces. And here we are with the computer back on the side. Now, I don't advise you to turn the machine up. Just take your screwdriver and come in at the side. I'm just doing that for the camera. At this point, we'll simply make sure that our latch is over. We're going to take our graphics card. Make sure that all of your covers off of the ports. Make sure that any protective cover on the golden fingers down here is off. And make sure you've also taken a plastic wrap. Most of these cards come with some type of cellophane or plastic wrap on the heat shroud. Make sure you take all of that off. At this point, we're going to line it up, but watch your cables. Do you see this PCI, watch your cables. Do you see this Wi-Fi antenna right here? You don't want to just push down and knock that off. So we're actually going to come down and around that and very carefully line it up with the slot. Now, unfortunately, the camera is not going to pick this up very well because you are looking directly overhead. I would need a cameraman at an angle. I am now lined up with the slot, and then it just pushes straight down. There we go. Now I've brought the Wi-Fi cable over it, as you can see, because I tilted it in, went down, and went around. Now, considering the confined space in here, considering that you have to come down and come over and then move it over, this is why the RX 470 and 480 cards simply don't fit in these machines. It's not a matter of it fitting by a few millimeters. Because of the need to move it in and twist it and get it under the cables and avoid these cables, you need more clearance than just a few millimeters. That's why this is such a great card. Now, once it's securely down, make sure that you've got it lined up on this back plate right here, and then all you do is lift that up and close it. The only other thing we have to do is to make sure that our 6-pin PCI Express power cable is plugged in. Now, in doing so, you will notice that we have a mess of a cable. Now, everything would actually work right at this moment. The graphics card will work. It'll ask for drivers when we get into Windows, but this is a mess, and so we need to clean this up. This is what our zip ties are for. I've taken one of the zip ties out of my kit, and at this point, we're going to consider how we want these cables tied up so that they don't interfere. But you see this 6-pin, this serial ATA power cable? I'm going to want this for my SSD, and the SSD is going to go right here. These cables I'm going to tie together, and I'll tie up with these cables and this cable, so they'll all sit bunched right here behind the hard drive, and they're not going to bother anything. But how much I can take will depend upon how much I need for the solid state drive. So I'm not going to tie it up just this second because I'm going to continue with the installation. If you're done, if you're not going to install an SSD, then go ahead and tie up your cables. And I'll show you that here towards the end of the video. But for now, I'm going to set that aside because we're going to install our solid state drive. And then we'll do the fan last. Now, to install a 2.5-inch solid state drive in this machine, you're going to need two things. The first thing you'll need is a 2.5-inch solid state drive, and I have selected the excellent ADATA SU900 256 gigabyte solid state drive. This is a new updated model from their SU800 3D NAND, its latest technology, very nice drive. I will definitely be doing some performance numbers on this soon, very looking forward to trying it out. The other thing you will need is a serial ATA cable. Why? Because the way Acer sets this particular machine up is the serial ATA cable coming off the motherboard that connects to the DVD drive is a hybrid combined cable that also has power attached to it. When it plugs into the DVD drive, it's all one unit. So we have to replace that cable with a different one to plug into our solid state drive. And here I've pulled the cable out just so you can see. This is what was plugged into the DVD drive. This is actually not a standard 5.25-inch drive. This is actually a laptop DVD drive, which is why it uses the mini laptop cable. This is the power connector. This is the data connector. So you can't just disconnect this whole assembly from the DVD drive and plug it into the solid state drive down here because it's physically different. The power connector is bigger. So we're actually going to discard this completely. I'm going to disconnect it from here, their adapter, and I've already unplugged it from the motherboard. And now I've pulled it out of the machine. This is what the whole assembly looks like, and this is why to install a 2.5-inch drive of any type here, you will have to have your own serial ATA cable, which is not included because this is not useful for anything but the built-in DVD drive. Again, this is all avoidable if you get an M.2 solid-state drive such as ADATA's SX8256 gigabyte drive. Now this is a nice 3D NAND NVMe, faster than the SU900. It's not a lot more expensive. At the time of this filming, this was only $15 more. I would be putting this in here, except it's going into my Ryzen 7 build, so I wouldn't. Furthermore, the drive cloning software, with the way the Acer systems are set up, really doesn't want to clone from the hard drive to an M.2 because you can't reassign the boot order in the BIOS. I'm hoping you can with this, but you can't with the M.2 slot, so we're trying a 2.5-inch drive instead. If you are okay to do a clean install of Windows 10 using a USB thumb drive and just wipe this hard drive and not keep your data, assuming you bought a new machine, then this would actually be less trouble because it just installs right onto the motherboard without any trouble or fuss. But we're not doing that today. Instead, we're going to be installing this one. And here's the actual solid-state drive out of the kit. It is a 2.5-inch drive. There's a label on one side, there's a label on the other. It's simply a plastic case with your connectors and some flash memory in it. For those of you curious as to what comes inside the box, there is a warranty and service guide. It does come, and I like this, it does come with a 2.5 to 3.5-inch adapter, and it comes with the screws. These are going to be very handy because we need to screw it in here, and this computer does not come with any spare screws. So if you don't have screws, this would be a good drive to have because it comes with them. Now we don't need the actual adapter because we have screw holes here. You could, if you needed to install this into a standard 3.5-inch drive bay, there are screw holes on the side to do so, but we're not going to bother because we have the adapters here, but we will use these screws. The other thing that's included in here is this, a spacer. If you bought this as a solid-state drive to install into a laptop that actually needed the drive to be 9.5 millimeters thick, you would take the tape strips off of here and actually insert this onto the drive in order to make it the correct thickness. That just simply makes it 9.5 millimeters thick instead of 7. But we're not going to use it because we're not using a laptop computer today. Now in order to install our solid state drive here, we need to turn the drive over so we see the 4 screw holes on the bottom. Make sure the power and data connectors are facing out towards the back. Now we simply bring it under the metal drive cage, and now we simply line the 4 screw holes up with the included screw holes on the machine. Now using a small Phillips head screwdriver, please note that a standard number 2 Phillips screwdriver is too large for these screws. Now we just screw them in. And there we go, the last one is in place. That is securely screwed and that is not going anywhere. Now there are 4 spare screws only because... Save these. If you ever need to install another drive, if you ever need to use this for anything in the future, this is very nice. This is coated, I don't know if it's powder coated or painted metal, but it's a very nice finish. This would be great for installing any 2.5-inch drive into a 3.5-inch base. So I'm definitely going to save that and probably use it at some point in the future. Now that the solid state drive is in place, I'm going to take my serial ATA data cable. I'm going to plug in one end right here, like so. And then the other end I'm going to run under the bottom through the retention clip that they've provided. You can't see it, it's way buried back there, but you'll see it if you buy one of these. Through there, and then plug it into the motherboard. And now you can see the cable is here. It bends around. There is a retention, a twist thing on the bottom of the case there. Basically, it's out of sight, out of mind, not bothering anything. Side note, one of the reasons why I had trouble cloning with an M.2 is there's no way to physically reverse the connectors. The BIOS of the system doesn't provide you the ability to dynamically reverse the boot order. It always wants to boot from one drive or the other. With physical cables, you can switch them. When you clone the drives and the clone is finished, you may simply need to switch the cables. You can switch them here, or you can switch them on the board. It has the same effect. The ability to physically switch them is what's going to give this a good chance for success, whereas it didn't work with an M.2. Now, when you hear the phrase good chance of success, don't panic. Keep in mind that cloning is never 100% perfect and does not work on all systems. It works on most. always be prepared for the fact that you might end up having to do a clean Windows reinstall if it doesn't. The last thing we need to do is plug in our power connector right here. And I'm going to bring this over and simply plug that in just like so. Now you'll notice that provides some good tension here. These aren't moving very much. But notice this is moving and it's going to contact your RAM and flop around. This is not good. We need to fix this. That is what we have our zip tie for. Now I'm simply going to take this cable and I am going to loop it over. I'm now connecting to the same spot that the zip tie was that Acer provided. I've basically got the cables pulled moderately tight, but not too tight. You are pulling against the graphics card, so you don't want to pull this too hard. You might break the end of your card. But just make it reasonably snug. There's a little bit of slack. That's not going to go anywhere. It won't hit your fan. It won't touch anything. Now, this, always make sure you trim these off, taking our handy pair of clippers, and there, we're all done with that. So far, we have done our system RAM upgrade, we've done our graphics card upgrade, we've done our solid state drive installation. Cloning will happen later, but we physically installed it. Finally, we have our fan. And here is what the fan looks like out of the box. Please note that the fan blades are twisted to blow in one direction. In this case, the fan will turn this way, it will bite the air, and it is going to blow it in this direction. So we want to make sure to install it exhausting out. It's going to take the hot air from around the CPU and the graphics card and force it out the back of the system. Now, do you have to install a case fan? No. I believe this will run just fine even without a case fan. But having a case fan will lower temps and ensure that the graphics card runs GPU boost, otherwise known as NVIDIA's auto overclocking, to its maximum potential. It also ensures that if you live in a hot environment where maybe your room is not air conditioned, it gives you additional cooling margin. My home is air conditioned to 72 degrees. I don't really have a cooling issue for my computers. If you live in an area where your temperatures are higher than that, a fan can come in quite handy, and that these are less than $10. Now, it does come with screws included in the package. You don't need any. And here is the 4-pin connector that plugs into the motherboard. This motherboard has a fan connector right here, and that's where we're going to plug it in. You simply take the fan, and you want to align it with the holes in the back. I'll pull it up and show you in a minute, but you want to think about where this cable is going to run. How do you want it to run? Do you want it to run around the fan and then come down? Do you want to run it completely clean and tie it off over here? What you don't want to do is end up with this big fan cable dangling around the case. So you want to give some thought to where the fan cable is going to go. This is square. You can orient it in any of the 90-degree orientations. So once you've figured out your orientation and how your cable is going to go and what you're going to tie it off to, now you can use a zip tie and tie it off either to this CPU power cable or to this bundle of cables. Get that plugged in, and I'll show you how to screw it in the back in just a second. I now have my fan orientation, and as you can see here, the fan is through the grate, and there are 4 screw holes right here, and the fan is lined up with them. Magnetic screwdrivers are so handy for this sort of thing. Standard number 2 Phillips screwdriver is all you need, and it actually physically screws into the plastic, so this will take a little more force than you might be used to with a computer because there's no pre-drilled holes. Now, screwing this in while holding it in the computer up is challenging, so I'm going to lay it on the flat side and actually screw it in, but that's how you do it. You put them right there, you screw it into the plastic, and then you're done. Our fan is now installed, and it's now plugged into the motherboard into the 4-pin fan connector. It only goes one way, so be sure to orient it correctly. There are guide notches on the socket, so just plug it in. It should go in very easily and very smoothly. That is controlled by the motherboard. There's no configuration to do for that fan. It's now going to blow the heat out of the back of the case. We are now complete with our physical upgrades. RAM is installed, graphics cards installed, solid state drives installed, fans installed. Please note that this solid state drive is not actually usable until we either do a clean installation or move Windows using the provided free cloning software from AData from the hard drive to the SSD. I will show you that in a different video. I will link to it in the video description below when I post it, but this is all about the upgrades. One question many people ask is, should they go ahead and think about replacing this power supply? And the answer is no. This power supply is just fine. 300 watts, it will drive this graphics card just fine. There is simply no need to replace it. If you think you need more than 300 watts, you probably shouldn't buy a pre-built like this. You should buy a custom built or build your own. It is just fine. These are the only 4 upgrades I would make to this computer. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section, and as always, check out the video description. Links to buy this computer, the solid state drive, the graphics card, the RAM upgrades, and the fan will all be down there at Amazon and Newegg as appropriate. Finally, my link to my Twitter account and my Patreon account is down there. If you want to support me, you like my videos, and you want to see more of this, please by all means consider supporting me. Anything you can offer is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you next time.